The beast of Ashbourne was a nightmare of matted fur and razor-sharp bone, known only for tearing grown men to ribbons. So when the village apothecary scratched it behind the ears and told it to sit, the Alpha King didn't expect his bloodthirsty monster to wag its tail. Rain turned the courtyard of Oakhaven into a thick, clinging stew of mud and manure. Bella Sterling knelt in the muck, her rough hands carefully gathering scattered bundles of dried wolfsbane and chamomile. She was 22, an orphan, and the village's only apothecary. Life had taught her to keep her head down her mouth shut and her eyes on the dirt. Today, however, the dirt was trembling. The heavy thud of hooves signalled the arrival of the Alpha King. Caelan of House Ashbourne did not visit his border territories out of goodwill. He came to collect the blood tithe. Caelan was a man carved from granite, and winter storms, possessing a reputation so bloody it made grown men weep. He was the mad Alpha. Rumours whispered that his wolf was a fractured, uncontrollable demon, a beast that killed without prejudice or mercy. He kept his court in an iron grip, ruling through sheer terror. Bella shoved the last of her herbs into her woven basket and moved to press her back against the tavern wall, joining the rest of the terrified villagers. Caelan rode at the head of a heavily armoured procession. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead by the rain, and his piercing grey eyes scanned the miserable crowd with utter disdain. Beside him rode Silas, his formidable commander of the guard, and in an iron-wrought carriage behind them sat Lady Genevieve, a high-born noblewoman, vying for the king's empty throne. "Line them up!" Caelan's voice barked deep and rough like grinding stones. "I have no patience for delays." Before Silas could issue the order, the air shifted. The metallic scent of blood and ozone flooded the courtyard. From the roof of the blacksmith's forge, a rogue werewolf, a massive scarred creature banished from a neighbouring pack, leapt down, aiming directly for the king. Chaos erupted. Screams tore through the rain. Guards drew their steel, but they were too slow. Caelan didn't even draw his sword. A horrific bone-cracking sound echoed over the screams. In the blink of an eye, the king was gone, replaced by a monster out of myth. Caelan's beast was easily 8 feet tall on all fours, its fur the colour of a starless night, its eyes glowing with a sickly, manic yellow light. It didn't fight the rogue. It butchered it. The violent display took only seconds. But when the rogue lay dead in the mud, Caelan's beast did not calm. The bloodlust had taken over. The yellow eyes snapped toward the villagers. It let out a deafening guttural roar that vibrated in Bella's chest. The villagers scattered like roaches. Bella turned to run, but a fleeing merchant slammed his shoulder into hers. She slipped in the mud, her basket flying from her hands, herbs scattering into the bloody puddles. She scrambled backward, her breath catching in her throat as the massive shadow of the Alpha King's beast fell over her. Guards shouted. Commander Silas notched an arrow, though he knew standard steel wouldn't pierce the Alpha's hide. "Sire, stand down!" Silas roared, terror edging his voice. The beast ignored him. It loomed over Bella Drool, dripping from its massive fangs, its breath hot and smelling of copper and raw meat. It lowered its massive snout lips, peeling back to reveal rows of deadly teeth. A low, vibrating growl rumbled in its chest, promising immediate death. Bella didn't close her eyes. She had spent her entire life capturing and taming the feral rabid hounds that roamed the Bloodwood. She knew the difference between a creature that wanted to kill and a creature that was trapped in its own panicked frenzy. She saw the dilated pupils, the stiff posture, the erratic twitch of the ears. This wasn't malice. It was sensory overload. It was pain. Without thinking, Bella reached up. A collective gasp sucked the air from the courtyard. Silas lowered his bow, paralyzed by the sheer suicide of the girl's action. Bella firmly placed her bare, mud-stained palm flat against the center of the beast's massive, wet nose. "Hush!" she commanded. Her voice wasn't a scream, it was a firm, grounding anchor. "You're making a scene, you great, overgrown mutt." The beast froze. The growling snapped off. It blinked the sickly yellow light in its eyes, flickering in confusion. "Sit down," Bella said, using the exact tone she used on the feral hounds stealing meat from the butcher. She tapped its snout twice. I said sit. The silence in the courtyard was deafening. To the absolute horror and disbelief of the royal guard, the Mad Alpha's beast, the monster that had single-handedly slaughtered armies, whimpered softly. Its hind legs buckled. It plopped its massive, blood-soaked rear onto the muddy ground. Bella sighed, wiping a streak of rain from her forehead. She boldly reached forward and scratched the beast vigorously, right behind its left ear, finding a sweet spot. There. That wasn't so hard, was it? A heavy thump, thump, thump echoed in the mud. Bella looked down. The beast's massive, lethal tail was wagging. It was slapping the wet earth with enough force to spray mud into the air. The monster let out a huff, leaning its massive, heavy head into her shoulder, closing its eyes like a lapdog begging for affection. Suddenly the massive heat retreated. Bone snapped and shifted. Bella averted her eyes as the beast vanished, replaced by the naked, heavily scarred form of King Kaelin, kneeling in the mud. Silas rushed forward, throwing a heavy fur cloak over his sovereign's shoulders. Kaelin clutched the cloak, his chest heaving, his grey eyes wide with a shock that bordered on terror. He stared at the apothecary kneeling in the mud. In all his years, the beast had never surrendered. It had never been tamed. "Who?" Kaelin rasped his voice, trembling with a mixture of awe and absolute fury. "Are you?" By nightfall, Bella was no longer an apothecary in Oakhaven. She was a prisoner in the iron-clad carriage bound for the capital Ironhold. Kaelin had given no explanations. He had simply pointed a shaking, blood-stained finger at her and ordered Silas to seize her. Now she sat across from the Alpha King as the carriage violently jolted over the cobblestone roads. Kaelin had been staring at her for 2 hours in suffocating silence. He was dressed now in dark leather and velvet, looking every inch the ruthless tyrant. But the memory of his beast wagging its tail hung between them like a ghost. "I am not a witch." "Your Grace," Bella finally said, breaking the silence. She kept her chin level. Fear would only provoke him. "I know herbs and I know hounds. That is all." Kaelin leaned forward, the shadows of the carriage dancing over his sharp jawline. "That was no hound. That was a curse that has plagued my bloodline for a century. It cannot be reasoned with. It cannot be soothed." He paused, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Yet it rolled over for a peasant girl with dirt under her fingernails. "Perhaps, Your Grace, you simply do not know how to speak to it." Kaelin's eyes flashed with anger. "You speak treason lightly." "I speak the truth," Bella countered. The beast was overwhelmed. The noise, the blood, the rain. It was lashing out blindly. "You fight it." I did not. The carriage ground to a halt inside the imposing gates of Ironhold. Before the doors opened, Kaelin leaned in close, his scent pine and dark earth washing over her. "You will remain in this castle. You are now the keeper of the beast. If you can control the monster inside me, you will live a life of luxury. If this was a fluke, and it turns on you." He didn't finish the threat. He didn't need to. Life in Ironhold was a snake pit. The court was ruled by whispers and treacherous alliances. Lady Genevieve, who had intended to use Kaelin's instability to have him declared unfit to rule, despised Bella instantly. Genevieve was a vision of silk and jewels, while Bella refused to shed her practical linen dresses and sturdy boots. The king keeps a stray dog from the mud to manage his mind. Genevieve sneered one evening in the great hall, swirling wine in a silver goblet. How tragic. Tell me, peasant, do you throw sticks for him? Bella ignored the barbs, her focus entirely on her task. Every 3 nights, Kaelin's curse forced a shift. To protect the castle, he would lock himself in the sub-level dungeons, a reinforced iron vault. On the night of her first trial, Commander Silas escorted Bella to the vault. The horrific sounds of Kaelin screaming as his bones broke echoed up the stone steps. "You do not have to go in there," Silas said, his gruff voice carrying a note of genuine pity. "He is mindless in this state. He has killed 3 keepers before you." "Open the door, Silas," Bella said evenly. The heavy iron door groaned open. Bella stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind her, locking her in the dark. The beast was chained to the wall by heavy silver restraints that burned its skin. It was thrashing violently, roaring in pure agony, snapping its jaws at the empty air. The yellow eyes locked onto Bella, and it lunged only to be jerked back by the thick chains. Bella felt a spike of fear, but she forced it down. She observed. She didn't look at the teeth or the claws. She looked at the body language. The beast was favoring its right foreleg, keeping it tucked against its chest. "Shh," she cooed, keeping her voice low and steady. She walked slowly, making no sudden movements. "I know, it hurts. The silver burns, doesn't it?" The beast growled, baring its fangs, but it didn't lunge again. It watched her cautiously. Bella reached into her apron and pulled out a thick cut of raw venison she had secured from the kitchens. She tossed it onto the stone floor. The beast sniffed it, then devoured it in one bite. "Good boy," she murmured. She stepped within striking distance. The beast tensed. Bella slowly sank to her knees. She held her hand out, palm up. "Let me see the paw. Give me the paw." For a long minute, the monster just stared at her. Then, with a pathetic whine that echoed off the stone walls, the massive wolf extended its right foreleg. Bella gently took the massive paw in her hands. The fur was matted with dried blood. She parted the thick hair and gasped. Driven deep into the pad of the foot was a jagged, cruel shard of iron, coated in a strange, shimmering green paste. It wasn't a stray thorn. It was a deliberate weapon. Wolfsbane and liquid silver, Bella realized with a jolt. Someone had driven this into the beast's paw during a previous shift. Every time the beast took a step, the poison pumped through Kaelin's veins, driving the wolf utterly mad with pain and fever. "Oh, you poor thing," Bella whispered. "No wonder you're out of your mind." She pulled a pair of iron tongs and a vial of healing salve from her pouch. "This will sting," she warned. With a swift, precise motion, Bella yanked the poisoned shard from the paw. The beast roared, throwing its head back. But instead of attacking her, it collapsed onto the stone floor, panting heavily. The sickly yellow glow in its eyes slowly faded, replaced by a deep, striking grey, Kaelin's eyes. Bella quickly applied the soothing salve and bound the paw with clean bandages. When she finished, the giant wolf nuzzled its wet nose directly into her neck, letting out a long, shuddering breath. It was a gesture of absolute trust. Bella stroked the thick fur on its neck. "Someone is trying to make you feral," she whispered into the quiet dungeon. "Someone in this castle wants you to go mad." The beast let out a low, rumbling growl of agreement. Bella knew then that she wasn't just dealing with a cursed king. She was standing in the middle of a deadly conspiracy. And if she told Kaelin, the betrayer would know she was onto them. The apothecary from the mud was now playing a lethal game of politics, and her only ally was a monster that everyone else wanted dead. The morning sun crept through the high, barred windows of the keep, casting long shadows across the stone floor. Caelan awoke, not with the agonizing, bone-deep ache that usually followed his transformations, but with a strange, foreign sensation, peace. He lay on a velvet chaise in his private chambers, staring at his own hands. There was no fresh blood under his fingernails, no new jagged scars across his ribs. Bella sat in a high-backed wooden chair across the room, quietly grinding dried willow bark in a stone mortar. The rhythmic scrape grind was the only sound in the vast chamber. "You did not run," Caelan observed, his voice thick with sleep and disbelief. He pushed himself up the dark velvet blanket, slipping to his waist. "Bella didn't look up from her mortar, and go where your grace. The guards outside your door would have skewered me before I reached the courtyard. Besides, I had a patient to tend to." Caelan stood crossing the room with the silent, predatory grace of his alter ego. He stopped before her table, his towering frame casting a shadow over her work. "Silas tells me I did not scream last night. He says the dungeons were silent after the first hour." "How?" Bella finally looked up. The close proximity of the Alpha King was suffocating. Without the beast's fur to hide behind, Caelan was dangerously striking his sharp features and piercing grey eyes, intense and demanding. Slowly she reached into the deep pocket of her linen apron and withdrew a small linen cloth. She unwrapped it and placed it on the table between them. The jagged iron shard sat there, the remaining green paste dried and flaky against the dark metal. "I pulled this out of your beast's right foreleg," Bella said, her voice dropping to a whisper. It was driven deep into the pad, coated in a mixture of liquid silver and crushed wolfsbane. "Someone didn't just want to hurt you, Caelan. They wanted to drive the wolf utterly mad with fever. They wanted a feral monster." Caelan stared at the shard. The color drained from his face, quickly replaced by a storm of pure, unadulterated fury. The veins in his neck bulged, and for a terrifying second his eyes flashed that sickly, manic yellow. But he closed them, taking a ragged breath, fighting the shift. "Who?" He growled, his hands gripping the edges of her wooden table so hard the timber splintered. "The wolfsbane is a specific strain," Bella explained, remaining perfectly still. "It has a purple hue to the dried leaves, native only to the eastern bogs. Lady Genevieve's ancestral lands." Caelan's jaw tightened. "Genevieve. She has been petitioning the High Lords to have me declared unfit, claiming the curse has rotted my mind. If the beast tore through Ironhold, they would have no choice but to execute me and put her on the throne." He looked at Bella, his expression softening into something vulnerable. "You saved me. You saved my mind." "I pulled a thorn from a paw," Bella corrected softly. "But the hunter who placed the trap is still in the castle." For the next month, a dangerous game of cat and mouse consumed Ironhold. To the public eye, Bella was nothing more than the king's bizarre new servant. But behind closed doors, she had become his closest confidant. They spent hours in the royal library, Caelan poring over trade logs to track the imported wolfsbane, while Bella brewed antidotes to flush the lingering silver from his bloodstream. The proximity bred an undeniable fire. Caelan, a man who had feared his own touch for a decade, found himself lingering near the apothecary. He would watch her categorize herbs, captivated by the steady, fearless nature of her hands. He realized he didn't just desire her. He was tethered to her. His wolf paced in his mind, whining for the scent of chamomile and rain that always clung to her skin. But Lady Genevieve was not blind. She noticed the king's improving health. The dark circles under Caelan's eyes were fading. He was sharp in council meetings, commanding the lords with a renewed, terrifying clarity. Her plot was unraveling. On the eve of the blood moon, The most powerful and agonizing shift for any alpha, the trap snapped shut. Bella was in the lower kitchens boiling a strong batch of valerian root to prepare for the night's shift. Suddenly, 2 heavily armed guards flanked the doorway. Behind them stood Lord Godfrey Genevieve's personal captain of the guard, Bella Sterling. Godfrey announced, his hand resting casually on the pommel of his sword. "By order of the High Council, you are under arrest for high treason and the attempted assassination of the Alpha King." Bella's blood ran cold. "That is absurd. The king himself will have your head for this." Godfrey smirked. "The king is currently incapacitated. He collapsed in the Great Hall not 10 minutes ago, coughing up black blood. A search of your chambers revealed 3 vials of refined nightshade hidden in your mattress." They had framed her. They poisoned Kaelan themselves to get him out of the way, knowing the blood moon would trigger his shift tonight. With Kaelan locked in the dungeon, delirious from poison, and Bella locked away, the beast would tear itself apart, breaking the iron door and ravaging the castle. Bella fought, kicking and thrashing, but the guards easily overpowered her. They dragged her down into the abyss of Ironhold, far past the king's reinforced vault, throwing her into a cold, damp cell in the lowest levels of the oubliette. As the heavy iron door slammed shut, plunging her into darkness, Bella heard the distant, agonizing roar of the Alpha King. The blood moon had risen, and Kaelan was entirely alone. The dungeons of Ironhold shook with the force of an earthquake. From her dark cell, Bella could feel the vibrations through the stone floor. Kaelan's beast was awake, and it was in agony. The nightshade coursing through his veins, combined with the agonizing pull of the blood moon, was a recipe for absolute carnage. "He's going to die," Bella thought, tears finally stinging her eyes. "The poison will stop his heart before he can shift back." Hours dragged on. The roars grew more violent, then began to weaken, turning into pathetic, gurgling snarls. Suddenly, a new sound echoed through the cavernous depths. Screams. Human screams! The unmistakable crunch of thick wood and bending iron reverberated down the stone corridor. The beast had broken out of the royal vault. Bella pressed her hands against her ears, waiting for the sounds of a massacre, as the monster ascended to the castle above to slaughter the court. But the heavy, thunderous footsteps didn't go up the stairs. They were coming down. The screams belonged to the dungeon guards. They were abruptly silenced by a sickening snap. A massive shadow blocked the barred window of Bella's cell. The air grew hot, reeking of copper and fury. The beast slammed its massive paws against the iron bars of her door. It was a terrifying sight. Its dark fur was matted with sweat and blood, and black foam dripped from its jaws, a clear sign of the nightshade poisoning. Its yellow eyes were wild, spinning with delirium. "Kaelan!" Bella whispered, stepping toward the bars despite the primal instinct screaming at her to run. The beast snarled, a terrifying sound that shook the dust from the ceiling. It gripped the thick iron bars in its jaws, and with a horrifying display of brute strength, ripped the entire door off its heavy iron hinges, tossing it aside like driftwood. The monster stepped into her cell. It towered over her chests, heaving eyes locked onto her fragile form. This was it. The beast was fully feral, poisoned into madness. But as it loomed over her, it didn't strike. It let out a desperate, wheezing whine and collapsed heavily onto the stone floor at her feet. Bella immediately dropped to her knees. She didn't have her herbs, her salves, or her tools. All she had was herself. She threw her arms around the beast's massive, terrifying neck, burying her face in the coarse, sweaty fur. "I'm here," she sobbed, holding the monster tightly. "I've got you. Fight it, Kaelan. Fight the poison." The beast let out a low rumble, leaning its heavy head into her lap. It closed its eyes, its breathing ragged and shallow. Bella sat there on the cold stone, rocking the terrifying Alpha King, whispering reassurances into his ears as the hours bled away. By dawn, the castle was in utter chaos. Commander Silas had rallied the royal guard, marching cautiously down into the dungeons expecting to find a slaughter. Instead, they found the beast's cell empty and the lower oubliette heavily damaged. Silas led the charge, his sword drawn, flanked by Lady Genevieve and Lord Godfrey, who had come to witness the tragedy of the king's demise. They reached the lowest cell and stopped dead in their tracks. The beast was gone. In its place, naked and covered in the sweat of a broken fever, lay King Caelan. His head was resting peacefully in Bella Sterling's lap. She was stroking his dark hair, looking up at the heavily armed party with cold, unapologetic defiance. Caelan's eyes snapped open. The grey irises were sharp and lethal. He stood slowly unabashed by his lack of clothing, moving with a terrifying, calculated grace. Silas immediately averted his eyes and tossed the king his heavy wool cloak. Caelan wrapped the cloak around his waist, his gaze locking directly onto Lady Genevieve. She paled, taking a step back behind Godfrey. "Arrest them!" Caelan commanded his voice, a low, gravelly threat that promised immense suffering. "Lady Genevieve and Lord Godfrey, for high treason, the attempted murder of your king, and the unlawful imprisonment of my mate." The courtyard went deathly still. "Mate." The word hung in the damp air like a thunderclap. "You are mad," Genevieve shrieked, as Silas's guards instantly seized her arms. "She's a peasant, a mud-caked witch. She poisoned you." "She saved me." Caelan roared, his voice momentarily dropping into the unnatural vibrating octave of the beast. Genevieve flinched, terrified. "She pulled your poisoned silver from my flesh, and she pulled the nightshade from my blood, simply by being my anchor. The beast does not answer to a crown, Genevieve. It answers to her." Caelan turned his back on the traitors as they were dragged screaming up the stairs to await the headsman's block. He walked back into the cell and knelt before Bella. The fearsome Mad Alpha, the tyrant of Ironhold, gently took the dirt-smudged hands of the apothecary and pressed them to his lips. "You should have let me tear them to pieces," he murmured, his eyes softening as he looked at her. "You are a king, not a butcher," Bella replied, a small, tired smile touching her lips. "Besides, you've ruined my favorite apron." Caelan chuckled, a rich, warm sound that had never been heard in the dungeons of Ironhold. He stood, pulling her up with him, wrapping a protective arm around her waist. A month later, the courtyard of Ironhold was filled once again, but not with the terrified peasants of a blood tithe. Banners of dark blue and silver snapped in the wind. The bells of the city rang a joyous, deafening chorus. Bella stood on the high balcony, wearing a gown of deep sapphire velvet, a silver crown resting atop her braided hair. She looked out over the cheering masses, still unable to fully comprehend the turn her life had taken, from the mud of Oakhaven to the throne of Ironhold. A low, deep huff sounded behind her. Bella turned. Caelan had shifted, not out of pain or the pull of the moon, but by choice. The massive 8-foot beast stood in the royal chambers, its dark fur brushed and gleaming its eyes, a calm, intelligent grey. Bella smiled, walking over to the monster that terrified continents. She reached out, scratching him firmly right behind the left ear. The beast leaned into her touch, letting out a soft, rumbling purr, and to the absolute bewilderment of the royal guard stationed at the door, the terrifying beast of Ashbourne began to enthusiastically wag its tail. If you loved seeing the fierce Alpha King brought to his knees by a fearless apothecary, smash that like button. The drama in Ironhold might be settled, but the romance is just beginning. What was your favorite plot twist? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to share this epic romance with your friends and hit subscribe for more thrilling, original fantasy stories every week.